be of the same high quality and properly balanced.
In this episode, I'm excited to bring you an extended version of a story we originally covered in August of 2022 when we visited the Fort Klamath Museum. Once a frontier military outpost during the American Civil War, this site now serves as a place for educating folks about regional history, and is the perfect backdrop for the Cascade Civil War Society to put on their fantastic living history reenactment.
I'm Keegan Van Hook, and this is Us As We Are.
This is a new dimension in sound. This is love. As the record plays, love.
All right, I'm one of the founding members of the Cascade Civil War Society, which we say shortly by CCWS. What you're about to see is a step back in time to the 1860s here at Fort Klamath. Now, Fort Klamath was established at the height of the Civil War in 1863, so it is considered a Civil War era fort. It was here until 1889, if memory serves me correct, when they closed it down.
This little spot is where the original guardhouse. We're pretty much on the same place as the original one was. Various Great Basin native bands, tribes were coming into conflict with the settlers, and so he wanted troops down here. Started out, they surveyed the site in 1862. And in 1863, they started building it. 2 companies of Oregon Volunteer Cavalry brought in a sawmill from Crescent City, California. I guess that would have been the most usable port from here, and put it on Fort Creek, started sawing lumber.
Now, there's not much left of the old fort originally here on the site. There are still a few buildings because in the winter of 1894-95, they had an enormous snowstorm here, and there was only a skeleton crew, and it crushed most of the buildings. Fort Klamath was also known for finding and finally registering where Crater Lake is. They had been found many times before and lost just as many times as it had been found. But again, we are an organization that studies the past. We like to bring it to people, and we're always looking forward to doing events like this. Now, I think the first person you'd like to talk to is probably our surgeon, Dan.
Yeah, and so I see Dan is over here with a whole medical setup. Dan, how about you just go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Okay, I'm Dan Foster, representing United States Army Medical Corps as a captain in the Medical Corps. As you'll notice, I have green shoulder straps. Green was the color of medicine, had been for several hundred years.
You've got a whole assortment of pretty scary looking medical equipment here. How about you just tell me about some of this old technology?
By modern standards, yes, it would be looking very primitive. But as I've said many times, we did the best we could with what we had. The most common weapons used during that time, which were .58 caliber, and fired a very large hunk of lead like that. Okay. Prior to the 1850s, they were .69 caliber and fired a round ball like that one. That does a lot of very serious damage to the human body, and it just literally destroys large pieces of bone. So much so that modern medicine even wouldn't be able to repair it because there's nothing left to repair. So we really had no option except to do a lot of amputations. Amputation was a primary function of a surgeon, particularly in the field. And I had a variety of instruments to perform that surgery, and if you'd like me to, I can go through some of them.
Please do.
Okay. The first instrument I would use would be this large Liston amputation knife, developed by a British surgeon by the name of Liston, who found he could do quicker amputations with a straight-bladed knife rather than the circular or sickle-shaped ones prior to that. Would cut through the flesh to the bone all the way around the limb above the damage. Would retract it with a cloth retractor similar to this one. Okay. Then use the capital saw for the large bones of the arms and legs. Would cut completely through the bone, sever it, throw away the damaged part. I would have Liston bone forceps like these to trim the ends of the bone. I want to make it as smooth and splinter-free as possible, because then I'm going to pull that flesh down over the stump of the bone into a pad and put it together. I could use then a couple of different methods. I could use the more traditional method of thin wire sutures and sew it, or by the 1850s we had a brand new invention called adhesive plasters. Some scientists in 1845 developed a process where they dissolved rubber in a solution of benzene and toluene, made a sticky substance they put on strips of cloth. The first bandage tape then was readily available by the Civil War. And this became our preferred method rather than the stitching because it's quicker, it's easier, it's less invasive. I'm not going to be poking holes with a great big needle, which could cause avenues for more infections that I didn't know how to treat anyways. Our painkillers at the time were narcotics made from opium. Opium, as I've said, has been around for thousands of years, going back, I don't know how far, honestly. In 1804, scientists refined the opium into morphine, which was also used. Alcohol was still a primary part of a surgeon's kit, used primarily to treat the shock from battle wounds. And to make the most prominent and common painkiller of the time, the surgeon would mix the alcohol with the opium, and he made the infamous laudanum, basically the aspirin of its time. And this was before we really began to understand the natures of addictions. It was before any laws that prevented open sale. You could buy a bottle of laudanum over the counter then, much like you could aspirin or Tylenol today. This was before electricity. Surgeries were performed in an outdoor setting like this. In fact, I'd be very fortunate to have this table and this awning. It could be under candlelight, lantern light, firelight. Surgeon might have been smoking a cigar while he's doing the surgery.
Is it hot wearing this black overcoat? You're in all black right now.
Just about, yeah. No, actually, you get used to it. And today it's only in the mid-80s.
Okay.
If it gets above 80s, like into the 90s, then the coat will come off or something. But in the old days, to be considered properly dressed, at least you had to have the vest on, and you could have it unbuttoned all the way except for the last button. And if you unbutton that, you were considered indecent. Okay, let me take you over to the blacksmith now.
Okay.
Introduce you to Gina and Richard.
I'm actually showing off a 100-year-old old bellows that was restored here by a friend of mine many years ago, and he found this in an old barn. And he actually put together this whole thing, hand sewed it right here. And so I bring it here because this would have been the actual forge that would have been at this fort.
And this is able to generate enough heat to be able to melt metal or at least get it to a point of flexibility?
No, melt it. If I would stand here and pump this thing and talk to you long enough, that would pick up a piece that would be a stub. It would just melt it, because that's like 3,000 degrees in there.
How did you get into the profession of traditional blacksmithing like this?
Good question. One day, I was a nurse and a photographer. One day I decided I wanted to pound steel. And so I found a man who let me come over, and he said, let's see what you can do. And he took a piece of steel that was round, and he said, and he showed me, he made this piece of steel that was round, pounded into a square, made a perfectly square point on the end. And he said, okay, now your turn. And I said, can I practice? And he said, no. He said, you either got it or you don't. I don't want to waste your time or mine. And I'm like, no stress. So I got this big old bellows thing. He had one that cranked, and I'm like, I've never done this in my life. And I did that point 3 times perfectly. He said, Gina, you could do anything you want blacksmithing. And I said, well, look at me. I'm this little person. I mean, I'm not, And he said, that doesn't make a difference. It's technique, and it's not so much brawn. Look a bit. And what you do when you're blacksmithing, you don't use the hammer. If you notice, my left hand is going backwards. My right hand is just going up and down. And that's a skill you've got to learn when you're doing this, because you normally will just want to move your hammer back and forth. And you're not to move your hammer back and forth. You move your steel back and forth. And your hand is, the right hand or the left, whatever is your hammer hand, is the hand that's doing the job of just pounding. So your left hand is the one that's creating what you're wanting to work on. The right hand is just doing its pounding for you. And what I'm doing right now is I'm pulling it back, so I'm making my steel longer. So if I would just pound in one spot, it would just be a blob, but I'm pulling it back like that, so it gets longer and draws out, so I'll have more of an end to decorate with. Okay, now.
That sure does get it red hot. That's incredible.
Yes, it does.
My name is Richard Rambo, and I'm making nails. Nails are so essential to America, to any country. Nails have been made, iron nails have been made for 5,000 years and up until about 1800. Nails were made by blacksmiths making the traditional square nail, and that's what I'm doing, demonstrating how square nails have been made for thousands of years. Additionally, most people don't know that the Roman crucifixion spike was also a square nail, made exactly the same way that I'm making these nails today, and made exactly the same way that blacksmiths were making nails up until about 1800. After 1800, some crafty fellow created a machine called a cutting machine. Stock would be put into the machine. The work person would pull a lever and cut diagonally. So we've got a lot of these nails. These nails were used from about 1800 to 1880, and people will find these when Fort Klamath was built in 1863. These are the types of nails that would have been used, the cut nails. You look at them, they're rectangular, and they, of course, they draw down to a taper, but they are very functional. Then, of course, about 1880, we restarted making our modern wire nails. These are pushed through a die. In the length of time it would take a blacksmith of old to make a square nail, our modern nail making process can make thousands of these.
We're taking you over to our post office, which was a big thing back in the 1860s because, you know, mail was important for everybody at home and for all the troops out in, you know, campaigning. And you can check out the spinning wheels as well.
Okay.
I have some examples of some letters here that were written by Civil War era. They're just copies, of course, and I enlarged them. It's not like you could phone home, or when you come back to base, you couldn't just call home. So they kept the letters that were written to them, and whenever they were lonely, they would bring those letters back out and reread them and kept them. And they also wrote letters in case they passed, that they would keep it on their person, and so if they did pass, someone could mail it off so family would know that they passed.
I am spinning flax, and this flax was grown in Oregon in the Willamette Valley. So this flax has already been retted, it's gone through the break, it's been scratched, it's been hackled through different grades of hackles, and I have dressed it on my distaff, and I'm attempting to spin it on this is a Norwegian super slanty flax wheel.
So you threw a lot of funny language at me there with some of what happens with flax, and I'll be honest that I didn't understand a single word of it. So tell me just in essence, basically, what is the goal here? What are you trying to accomplish using this flax?
I am making string.
Okay.
String can be used as a survival tool. Every culture, I don't care what your heritage is, has a tradition of twining or making fiber. If you can make a string, you can make a snare, a trap, a fishing line. You can tie your stuff together and haul it from place to place. So I have a drop spindle here. Oh, goody. This I was able to purchase. I believe it was legal. This is little teeny piece of clay is from 400 AD from Teotihuacan in Mexico. Wow. Originally, people were doing things like this, or just by hand. The spinning wheel didn't become common until about 1300, so it's a new invention, whereas people have been spinning for tens of thousands of years. So here's my spindle. There's the bobbin right there. It's just that the wheel turns it for me. And another thing it does is it also pulls the fiber in. So whereas with this, I have to stop and wind it on manually, this does it. All of the finest brocades and fine linen and velvet, everything you can think of was made or can be made like this. Mm-hmm. So machine making of fiber and cloth is relatively new in the scheme of things. Mm-hmm. got to keep the old skills alive. Hopefully we'll never have to use them, but if we do, we want to know how. Besides, it's fun.
Civil War affected everyone. That's kind of where our club comes in with the Cascade Civil War Society. We wear the same uniforms. There's a lot of the same arms, at least at the start of the conflicts with the various troops. This is the symbol of the 5th Corps of the Army of the Potomac, and the red means it's the 1st Division. 20, that's 20th Maine and Company A. And that had a little, besides unit pride, which was important, it also, back at least in the Civil War, you had mass casualties, and dog tags were not issued then. You find some poor soul out who's dead, well, if we can find his unit, we can identify him.
The term we're talking about is FARB, F-A-R-B.
Yeah, what is FARB?
Far be it from us is what we can figure it out. But it's been around for a long time with reenactors, not only Civil War, but you name the group. If it's a reenacting group, they use the thing. What it simply means is get all your modern stuff, put it away, get it out of sight, okay? Like one of the worst ones that drives me crazy is when I see somebody with glasses like I've got, and they have sun clips on overneath them. Now, they did have sunglasses back in those days. In fact, I've handled a pair from 1830. And they was really unique. They were square. They were made out of stained, smoked glass. But we do try to keep all of our modern stuff hidden so we can continue the illusion that you've stepped back in time. Simple as that.
So FARB is anything that is out of the period.
Yeah, like if you park your car in the middle of the thing, get that FARB car out of here, you know. That's a big FARB, really big FARB. Coolers are another thing. Like if you look around the corner here, see behind Jeanette, that round thing? That's FARB, but she's defarbed it by putting a canvas over it.
Oh, those are water coolers.
Yeah, lift it up so they can see it.
I am here representing the Mount Mazama Mountain Men group, which I am a member of. And this particular project is a piece of deer hide, buckskin, that has been brain tanned. The brain of any animal is adequate to tan that particular hide. So there's a process that you go through, which includes the cleaning off of the membrane of the interior side, and then working at cleaning off the hair side and the membrane that attaches the hair to the hide. Then it goes into the brain tan solution, and there is a chemical reaction of some of the oils and or whatevers of the brain that causes the glues that are inside all skins and fibers that glue up and make a tight rawhide piece. I mean, something like a drum skin you might think of, that's rawhide. If you look at these two, these are two deer hides right here that have been brain tanned and that I have worked down to a point where if you look at it, it's very flexible piece of leather that you could easily make a vest out of, a jacket out of, a pair of pants out of, maybe a breech clout. Down here is a whole group of the odds and ends that I teach about when I am working with folks who want to hear about what the mountain men did, those young 18-year-old, 19-year-old boys who dad owned a farm back east, and they liked being out in the woods with their black powder muzzleloader gun, and they would be out doing hunting, deer, whatever, and then they started hearing about the excitement of being a mountain man and rendezvous and the money that was available on the beaver pelt. So this is actually a beaver pelt here. And that beaver pelt, like the rabbit pelt behind it, but the beaver pelt was what was used to make those tall hats like Abraham Lincoln, you see him wearing. So not the guard hair that's on the top, but the fine fur that is down below it is what they would emulsify to make those hats that were in demand in England and in France by everybody who had some money. And then they, of course, needed to work with the Native Americans, who, of course, were here before. And they would work with them a little bit. Sometimes they were able to come up with a peaceful method. Typically trading was what they looked at. They would have something that the Native American thought might be interesting to have, because their tools, like this piece of obsidian here, was a spear point or an atla point or a knife that's made out of rock.
Wow.
Once you learn how to chip that stone, nap it, it's called napping it, you can make a very sharp, feel that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, oh wow. So they were very useful, but if you were to crack that up against something, lo and behold, you would lose your knife. So then white man come along with steel. So then this is an old Green River knife here that I carry around when I'm all deked out of my mountain man outfit. If you're going to live out in the boons, you better be able to put up a fire there to roast up your meat and to warm up when things are cold. And so, again, the mountain man would purchase from the blacksmith at a previous town a chunk of metal that is high carbon, probably typically made back then out of the furriers, that's the horseshoers, rasps that were worn down, and the blacksmith could then heat those up, take the temper out of them, where they could then mold and work with it, and yet they're still high carbon if they were careful about the way they handled their blacksmithing product. And they would make these, and if you have a piece of flint, which is kind of hard to come by out here in Oregon, but there are other little rocks that seem to work, and you take and see the sparks?
We're going out to where we've set up our cannons, the artillery field, to fire the cannons generally. We do charge a fee, and we make $2-3 off of it. Gunpowder has gotten terribly expensive, and it is something else. Can I have the cannon crew over?
That is the 3-inch ordnance rifle. It was extremely accurate, and the crews got to be extremely good at estimating ranges. Generally take 7 or 8 man crew, 4 up on the gun, 1 carrying powder, and 2 at the limber to select and prepare the rounds for firing.
Now, when I look at this, by default, I would probably refer to it as a cannon, but you call it a rifle. What makes it a rifle?
Because it is rifled. You can see down the muzzle, we had a bit of it rifled just so it would appear. That's what imparts the spin on the projectile and gives it its accuracy.
Gotcha.
Most cannon would be smoothbore, like the mountain howitzer there. Much less accurate, partly because the projectile actually moves a little bit as it goes down the barrel, and you never know at exactly what angle it's going to come out. So the range on this, like I said, was 1 mile or 1.5 miles. The mountain howitzer had about an 800-yard range. We'll start with the bolt. This one, it weighs about 10 pounds. Now, the way it's built, it's solid metal. This band is lead. When it's fired, the pressure from the powder pushes up, squeezes the lead, and that engages the rifling. That's what gives it its accuracy.
This is really heavy. It kind of, I don't know if I'm making it look heavy, but it's quite heavy.
Imagine your average bowling ball.
Yes.
And there you go.
Yeah. This is about the weight of a bowling ball, and you would not want to be hit by this.
Well, this is the actual ammunition that we use for our reenactment. This one is a 1 pound charge. That's what we do on our Bang for Bucks program, and people really enjoy shooting that because it's loud and very flamboyant.
This is a friction primer, and this is what sets off the charge. And what you want to do, on the order to prime, you'll hold it right so, and you come up and you'll stick it right in the vent hole. And when you put this in, do not put your finger over the top of this tube, because if it goes off, bad things happen.
Right.
So, and then you want to keep the string nice and tight. You want to hold it down by your hip, like so. and then I'll yell clear front, and the guys will step away, and then I'll yell fire, and you'll pull down to the left.
Okay.
Just like that. Advance the round.
Other way. Turn around. There you go.
Vent! Vent, stop! Prick! Prime!
All right, so it's ready to fire?
Yeah.
Ready.
All right.
Right. Clear front!
Hi there, folks. I'm Keegan Van Hook, and this is Us As We Are.
That works.
Nice. That's fun.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for bringing us out here and introducing us to all these amazing people and sharing with us some of this incredible history. I think we all heard a lot of stories that we've never heard of before. So thank you so much for inviting us out
It's been my
here.
pleasure. And I hope that the viewing public gets involved with this type of stuff because it is our American history.
Are there more?
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, you may also enjoy our more recently shot Dixie in Oregon, where we got to witness the CCWS in a full-blown battle reenactment. Check it out. I'm Keegan Van Hook, and this is Us As We Are.